old hearts in hallowed halls could talk, these would have a tale. Sun going down and dinner bell, and children playing at hide and seek from floor to rafter. If these halls could speak, these old-fashioned window panes were eyes, I guess they would have seen it all. Each little tear and sign for prom, and every dream that we came to seek or followed after. If these walls could speak, they would tell you that I owe you more than I could ever pay. Here's someone who really loves you. Don't ever go. That's what these walls would say.
Welcome to the 1993 Baseball Hall of Fame special. Hello, everybody. Thanks for being with us. Along with Dave Campbell, I'm Gary Miller. And Dave, this weekend, that's Reggie's house. Reggie Jackson is a name that elicits a response of some kind in all of us. What do you think of when you hear the name Reggie?
Well, Gary, I think like everybody, you think about his defining moment, the 1977 World Series, the 3 consecutive home runs in Game 6. Yankees win the world title for the first time in 15 years. But more than that, he's one of the most unique personalities of our generation. Steve Jacobson, a writer for New York Newsday, once wrote about Darryl Strawberry. He's like an enigma wrapped up inside a puzzle. And when I read that, I thought of Reggie Jackson because he can be so complex. Yet, Reggie says he's got 6 or 7 real good friends. Maybe they understand him, but for the rest of us, a lot of Reggie will always probably remain a mystery.
He truly was larger than life and still is to this day, even after his playing days. But a lot of it was almost a caricature. Is there another side to Reggie Jackson that he doesn't display?
I think absolutely, and you're going to see that today in his acceptance speech because his father will be here, Martinez Jackson, who played in the old Negro Leagues at $7 a day, and Reggie reveres his father. He used to take him to spring training every year. A lot of people don't know that. Reggie could be very flamboyant, but he had a great love for his father, and he'll honor his father today, you can bet.
You know, you take his accomplishments, 6th all-time in home runs. There's so many of them that stack up with anybody who's enshrined already. One of my favorites is 10 of 11 years from 71 to 82. His team won division titles. He truly thrived in the postseason, especially the World Series. Take a look at these numbers, and you see why they called him Mr. October. 10 World Series home runs, a couple of dozen RBIs, the highest slugging percentage of all time in World Series play. Numbers are just a part of what made Reggie Jackson a Hall of Famer. Our Dan Patrick sat down with him for more on the Reggie Jackson saga.
His plaque in Cooperstown will read Reginald Martinez Jackson. But in his time, he was known simply as Reggie.
Reggie Jackson has just tied it up, holy!
Do you still hear that Reggie chant in your head? No question. I mean, it was powerful. It had energy. It was unbelievable.
But Cooperstown has a way of making heroes human. Even Reggie.
No matter how big someone's ego is or how big you think it is, to hear a Jim Palmer or a Johnny Bench or a Marichal be humbled by that institution, there's nothing bigger for me.
In a career that spanned 21 years, Jackson wore the caps of 4 major league teams: the A's, the Orioles, the Yankees, and the Angels. He was a part of 5 world championship teams, and from 1971 until 1982, the teams he played for won divisional titles in 10 of those 11 years. Reggie was named to 14 All-Star teams and is only the 29th player elected to the Hall of Fame in his first year of eligibility.
Makes you kind of like Willie. It makes you kind of like the Babe, kind of like Joe, kind of like the Mick. And so, like, you know, I'm not first in line, and I'm not the best, but I get to stand near, and it's neat.
His 563 home runs ranks him 6th on the all-time list, but he hit 300 only once in his career and struck out more than anyone else, ever.
I failed so often that I couldn't think about looking bad or feeling sorry or getting down. It was nothing for me to hit 2 home runs and punch out 3 times. That was the Reggie day. A hat trick and a couple of bombs.
Reggie's homers were legendary in length, and perhaps his most majestic blast came in the 1971 All-Star Game at Tiger Stadium. In the bottom of the 3rd, the American League trailed 3-0. Reggie was called on to pinch hit against Doc Ellis. The count went 1-2, and Reggie decided to change his approach.
I stepped out of the batter's box, and for the first time all year, I choked up about a half an inch. And I said, I'm going to make contact. I'm not going to strike out. And Doc Ellis hung a slider. I mean, it was right up, and it was fence high. All I had to do was hit it. And pow, the ball went so far, it kind of surprised me. And I looked up, and I started walking, and I honestly was shocked at how far it went.
While he's proud of his days with the A's, the legend of Reggie peaked during his tenure with the Yankees. There were memorable home runs and memorable run-ins with Yankee manager Billy Martin. It was a relationship Reggie couldn't quite understand.
We could have been a fabulous tandem. We had this very similar backgrounds. I really don't know why it worked out. I don't know whether it was jealousy or dislike. Me for him, he for me. I think it was sad that it didn't work because we could have been a hell of a tough, dynamic duo.
In 1977, Reggie led the Yankees to their first World Championship in 15 years. In the World Series against the Dodgers that year, Reggie struggled early, but hit one out in Game 4. And in his last at-bat in Game 5, he hit his 2nd home run of the series. Then came the most memorable night of his career, Game 6, October 18, 1977. Reggie walked in his first time up, never taking the bat off of his shoulder. The next 3 pitches he saw put Reggie Jackson in the history books.
Steve Yeager, who was catching, did not pick up the fact that I had moved off the plate a few inches because the scouting report on me was to pitch me in. I got off the plate, but leaned back over so my body would look the same position to the pitcher. And when Hooten let the ball go, I rocked back and started wailing. The ball was in. It was a ball this time. But I leaned back and cheated and smothered the ball.
Drive to right field and deep. Way back. Going, gone. Another home run for Reggie Jackson.
I went to the plate and I said, I'm going to try to hit another home run. I said, I got nothing to lose. I said, I can strike out. I'm going to get an ovation. And pow. I hit number 5.
There's a fly ball to center field and deep. That's going to be way back, and that's going to be gone. Reggie Jackson has hit his 3rd home run of the game.
On that day, Reggie became more than just Reggie. He became Mr. October. That's Mr. October, future, and now present Hall of Famer.
Are you worried that 30 years from now, you may not get the respect from younger players and fans, that they may forget what Reggie was all about?
Reggie is going to continue. And I feel grateful and very fortunate with it that the Reggie, the high mom stuff, the hitting the home run with the stare, all those are footprints that I will leave, and I won't be forgotten. It just won't happen.
Well, Dave, Reggie certainly never lost any of his bravado. His enshrinement in Cooperstown will ensure that he'll be remembered forever. The only other true free agent was his old teammate, Catfish Hunter, so he sets another standard in that regard. And I think better than any other ball player, Reggie understood the nature of celebrity.
He really did. He never met a television camera he didn't like. He knew when the writers wanted a quote. One of his most famous, when he shows up in New York, he says, "I am the straw that stirs the drink." Some of his teammates didn't take too kindly to that, particularly the late Thurman Munson. But Reggie always was outspoken, and he says that at a time black athletes couldn't be until people like Muhammad Ali and Jim Brown came along to pave the way. So he gives them a lot of credit for allowing him to be outspoken. He was very articulate, and he certainly was never boring.
You can bet that his acceptance speech on his day of greatest glory will have memorable quotes as well. That's coming up. We'll bring you that, as well as even in failure, he was monumental. The strikeout from 1978. When we return, Bob Welch, Reggie, reflect.
The 1993 Baseball Hall of Fame induction ceremonies are brought to you by Budweiser, the king of beers, who reminds you, friends know when to say when.
And they're out now picking up Reggie's walking around money.
Well, they throw him quarters. It's a habit that's grown here. Reggie can't keep all the money. Turns it over to his favorite charities. But one day came in with, during the course of the game, over $81 in quarters.
It wasn't just loose change. They threw candy bars Reggie's way. It was one of his most famous statements. In 1976, his 1 year in Baltimore, he said, hey, if I played in New York, they'd probably name a candy bar after me. Both came true. The 70s were indeed his sweetest decade. Take a look at the numbers. He hit nearly 300 home runs, second for that span. Only Bobby Bonds had as many extra base hits, and he knocked in more than 900 runs, the fourth highest total during that decade. But no matter what the year, no matter which 10-year span you take, nobody struck out more than Reggie Jackson. And no strikeout stuck out more than the one against young Bob Welch in the '78 World Series. Our Mark Schwartz sat down with both of them to relive that moment.
You couldn't ask for a more dramatic moment for a young pitcher to walk into right here.
Bobby Welch had just 4 months of big league experience and a heater in the mid-90s. Reggie Jackson had the ball game in his hands. 2 outs, 2 on, 9th inning. Just Mr. October, the rookie, and a 1-run Dodger lead.
I did my best to look at Welch's face. I wanted to make eye contact with him, but I never did.
Why do you want to look at his eyes?
Because I felt if I could look in his eyes, I could intimidate him or I could find something out about him. And I was wondering, you know, how hard he threw. I heard that he would throw 95 miles an hour.
You know, at that particular time, I was probably throwing as good as I could have ever thrown in my life, you know, as far as velocity-wise.
Right here. Strike one. Wow.
The first pitch he made to me was the best pitch I had to hit, and I missed it.
And I think that particular pitch is probably the best one that he had an opportunity to hit. I mean, I threw one there to him later in the series and knocked out of it.
Bob Welch.
And the last thing I wanted to do was to throw the ball out over the plate after I just had given him a pitch there that, you know, he had an opportunity to drive.
1 ball, 1 strike. Welch's next 3 deliveries are high and very hard. Reggie stays alive, barely. The count is now 1-2. Advantage Welch? Depends on your perspective.
He doesn't have an advantage because he is facing me in the World Series. I wasn't going to misfire. I knew the ball I wanted to hit.
By now, Jackson's hoping for a breaking ball. Instead, he gets another heater, somewhere between his elbows and his eyebrows.
I'm sure he's instructed every pitch to throw was supposed to be a fastball, up and in.
You know, I'd love to have been able to drop a forkball on him here or something like that too, but I didn't have it.
You were Bob Welch, 21-year-old fireballer, period.
Period.
Pitch number 7. A huge swing, another foul back.
I like the ball middle away, but you saw there that ball was middle in, and I don't handle the ball there, never did.
So this guy was basically putting the ball exactly where he needed to put it.
Yes, he was.
Throughout the entire at-bat.
Yes, and he had hair on it. It had mustard on it.
It was kind of a situation where I needed to make a good pitch every pitch. And, I mean, you can see there was only 1 strike I threw him.
He never threw a breaking ball in this at-bat. And, you know, I probably would have put the bat on the breaking ball.
2 balls, 2 strikes. No time for a breaking ball here, or for any pitch in Reggie's wheelhouse. Pitch number 8 is high and away. Ball 3.
He's not looking for a walk. I mean, he had plenty of opportunities to walk here. Those are a lot of balls, but, I mean, he wants to basically hit a home run.
Okay, you got 2 strikes on Reggie Jackson. You only need 1 more. Are you going to try to do it right here? You're going to just try to
blow it by him for
Well, I
strike
just
three?
assumed him hit a little ground ball back to me or something, you know, without going through all this stuff.
The count is full. The runners will be moving. For Reggie, the time and place couldn't be more perfect. For Welch, the challenge to be perfect once more.
That might be the most dramatic situation I've ever hit in. Nothing like this in the World Series. I mean, even the home runs I hit in the World Series, the 3 home runs, the game was decided.
Are these guys thinking Welch was going to get him, or are these guys thinking, oh, my God?
Shoot, I mean, going on a previous year, they're probably waiting to see it fly somewhere, you know.
There they go. Struck him out. Ball game is over. You got Reggie.
Yeah, it's a good spot.
Now, see, if you run that back, this is a super pitch. That ball is on the inside part of the plate, and I just need to give Welch credit. Now, what happened to me in this situation is I got so focused, the count ran to 3 and 2 with 2 outs, and I forgot that the runners would be moving. My focus was too narrow. I trying to catch up to this boy throwing that 90-mile-an-hour piece of cheese.
You know, that was that, you know, I hope I have something that reaches that level again.
I didn't recognize that the runners would be running. I wasn't complete. I had made a mistake, and I was beat.
Dave Campbell rejoins me now, and Dave, Reggie didn't even want to do that. He said, what do you show me striking out for? All the great things I did. They did go on to win that World Series, the last team to repeat, the 1978 team, but nobody struck out more spectacularly than Reggie Jackson. How do you remember that confrontation?
Just pretty much the way it was. It was power on power, and I looked at it as maybe being a little bit symbolic from the standpoint Reggie had earned the mantle Mr. October the year before. He had cemented his place in history with the 3 home runs. But now maybe it was time to pass the torch to the new kid on the block, Bob Welch. Even though Reggie had a lot of good years left, this was a key moment in that World Series. Greg Nettles went on to really become the Yankee star during that series. He made the great defensive plays in Game 3 that turned it around, but even though Reggie wasn't the central figure, he still stuck the hip out that one time, and that rundown caused a big brouhaha. He was always the center in the middle of everything.
It showed that he really had instincts for the game. He wasn't just a great slugger who hit the ball out or struck out more than anyone else. Well, we've talked about him enough. We're going to hear from the man himself when we come back. The induction speech from Reggie Jackson. And on our way to that, another New Yorker who owned this town a year ago, Tom Seaver, reflecting on one of the men who influenced him most.
If all these other people taught me how to get here and what to do when I got here, Gil Hodges told me how to be a pro and stay here. The most important man in my life from the professional standpoint of my career. And God, I know that you're letting Gil look down here today, and I know that he is part of this. And the other person who is watching now, God love her, my mom.
Welcome back. And now the moment we've all been waiting for, including the man himself. Reggie Jackson accepts his induction as the 216th member of the Hall of Fame.
When I started to think about my life in baseball, in order to prepare for this day, I realized I owed a lot of people in my life something, both inside and outside the game. Not only for helping me reach the Hall of Fame, but more important for being there in each in his or her own special way. I want to talk about those people, about what they've meant to me. I also want to mention my dreams and for the future of the game, and what I think we owe the past. I'll start by acknowledging the most influential person in my life. This is an easy one. Dad, why don't you just wave your hand, please? Martinez Jackson. Okay, no more applause. You're stealing my thunder. I'm in the Hall of Fame, and I'm addressing you today in large part due to the lessons I learned from him. My dad raised me in the 50s and 60s in a time when we were called colored, as were all black people. He struggled with being treated as a second-class citizen, but still did his best to climb the ladder of equality. He had the ability to express himself, to complain and be heard at a time when it wasn't readily accepted. His thoughts and expressions formed and molded me into the person I am today. I can still hear him, all it was an awful long time ago, correcting my English, making sure I didn't slur my words, say uh-huh, nope, yep. Get an education, he'd say. Show some ambition. He also made sure I developed more than the skills of speaking well. He taught me to put the right thoughts behind the right words at the right time. Because of who my dad was and who he helped me to become, I developed a drive with my God-given talents to be someone more than a ball player. He was then a good father. He's become a great friend. I want to take special time now to thank my mom. You know, I guess I'm pretty much the same when it comes to moms. What do you thank your mom for? Just for being there. You know, it seemed like the older I got, the more she became a part of my life. Also my brother Joe, who was more than a brother. He was important to my upbringing. He's a cool dude, and he's my friend. My life started in baseball with a groundwork that was laid by others. Rachel Robinson is here, and her daughter Sharon, and her nephew. I share this place today here with Jackie. Jackie Robinson opened the door for me and others, before and after me. He was the kind of man that people talk about as a role model. He was the role model I think we all needed, both black and white. He was the right person at the right time. I remember when I first saw Jackie play in Connie Mack Stadium, he hit a line drive home run in right field. Slapped the side of his hip, and old number 42 hit home run number 12 in Connie Mack Stadium, right over Wally Post. It was a little difficult for me at that time because I wanted to root for Duke Snyder and Mickey and a few of the guys like Stan the Man. But in my neighborhood, you had to be quiet about those kind of things. You had to root for the Dodgers. I'd like to take this time to pause and remember Larry Doby. He was the first black player to play in the American League. Before Jackie opened the door, the players in the Negro Leagues knocked on the door. However, we all know what happened. Nobody answered. They were outside and nobody let them in. I don't think we can talk about our success without turning to those players and saying, we're grateful you were there. We thank you. We owe you. I grew up in the 50s and 60s in Wyncote, PA, a small white town. Believe me, it was painful as a teenager growing up. I can say I was lucky my father never saw color. Thanks, Dad. My father always talked about getting an education, so I felt lucky to attend Arizona State on a football scholarship and play football for Arizona State's Frank Kush. I learned toughness from him. Want me to describe it for you? He was as tough as Charlie Finley and George Steinbrenner all rolled into one. On a $5 bet, I went to play for Bobby Winkle's baseball team, and that's where I learned to hustle on every play. I think we'd all like to see more of that. The mid-'60s was a time for a search for identity for a lot of people. At that time, I developed a respect for Muhammad Ali. He gave me and a lot of black people the confidence to speak out, to be proud of who I am. Simultaneously, I learned to listen to Martin Luther King. And from that, I learned that if you spoke with elegance and style, they'd hear you. I knew of the history of the Negro League players from my dad's little talks about Satchel, Josh, and Double Duty Russell, Cool Papa Bell, Jackie and Larry, Willie and Hank, Ernie, Newt, Campy and Monty. And because of all their struggles, I knew I needed to articulate and not just accommodate. Never really saw myself as a leader. I was struggling too hard to become a ball player and a man. Thankfully, I had some pretty good teachers and role models along the way. I thought Willie Mays was perfection as a player. He showed us how the game should be played, from hitting to running, just walking on the field. I saw in Hank Aaron the qualities of determination, consistency, and character. People talk about superstars. The guy plays for 2 or 3 years, he gets 10 or 15 million. To me, if you take a look at the guys behind me, superstar was expressed by Aaron because he personified the idea that greatness is measured over time. I learned how to play the game and how it was supposed to be played by watching Earl Weaver and Frank Robinson's Orioles in the 60s. I was fortunate to spend the winter of '70 with Frank. Again, good luck and timing. He taught me about leadership, professionalism, about maturing, friendship again. Baltimore. God, what a great baseball town. It was a whole new world for me in '77. New York, the Big Apple. I learned about mistrust, love, hate, support, comfort, bitterness, ego, self-centeredness, hurt, greatness, but most of all, again, friendship. I also learned theological support and understanding from a friend in Arizona named Gary Walker, who called me nearly every day with relevant quotations from the Bible. It was a complex, difficult time in my life. Thanks for the support, Gary. I want to express my appreciation today and every day for being accepted as one of the best of all time. I know I wasn't the best. All I have to do is look behind me. But I tell you something. It's nice to know when they have roll call, sooner or later, they got to call my name. I think I'm one of the wealthiest guys in the world because I've got so many friends. I'll continue to be reminded that while I'm being honored by the Hall and all my loved ones who are here, and while this is my day, I'm just a link in the chain that makes the whole wheel go round. And so too are today's players and those in the baseball community. So whether you're the Babe, Stan the Man, Say Hey, Mr. October, you're just part of a long tradition of baseball. And the game is owed our respect and gratitude. We all borrow from it, exploit it, cling to it, and need it. The house that Ruth built still stands, but the Babe's not there anymore. Henry's record still stands, but he's not even on the field anymore. Mr. October still surfaces in the fall, but he's not there in the summer. But for some unexplained reason, the game still gives to us all. Whether we think we owe, take, or borrow, baseball's a machine that requires each one of us to polish his part. And whether we're currently in or out of the game, we each need to remember that even if the wheel seems to wobble, it still rolls on with or without us. We owe it to the fans and players coming along to keep it rolling because we're just caretakers for a short time. So if your name is Peter O'Malley, George Steinbrenner, or Ted Turner, or whether your name is Kirby, Roger, Barry, or Cal, realize you're just a part, just a link in the chain in the big scheme of things. Remember along the way that something that we can all learn from these guys behind me, it's the need to humanize the game. I still feel energy when I see a player in the bigs who's in all of Williams, Mano, the Big D, Koufax, or Marichal, or Clemente, not because of a willingness to acknowledge the greatness of these giants, because I know that the player of the day needs to understand that his display of respect is needed for the game to endure. If the game is lost to the economics which drive it, then we'll lose the humanity that is uniquely the game. We all must feel it and live it in our own way and be mindful of its vulnerability to abuse. Let us not exploit the game to the point that future generations won't be able to afford the bill that they'll get to keep it going. So you guys behind the mics, Vin Scully, Chris Berman, Al Michaels, and Dan Patrick, and you guys with the pens, Dave Anderson, Leonard Kopic, Mike Lupica, Jim Murray, and Steve Jacobson, let's take the time to bring back a focus so that the people will think of the game as the sport it once was. It's needed now. I've come full circle. I'm back with the Yankees, for whom I have a great deal of gratitude. Because they, along with the Upper Deck Company, have the vision that I could bring to their front office and boardrooms more than my status as a celebrity. Have given me the recognition that I'm able to bring to the party a wealth of knowledge about the game and the judgment that's needed to maintain the trust that baseball has put in all of us. Whether it's being involved on the field or in the boardroom, with a team or with a baseball company, I'm being recognized for what I can give by people who look past my mirror image, beyond the accolades, to what I have to offer. I think I'll now thank the guy who really makes it all happen. Thank you, Lord, for the gifts you've given me. Friends, in the words of Lou Gehrig, today I consider myself the luckiest man on the face of the earth. I've had a dream, and I was able to live it. And thank God it's not done yet. Thank you. I'm a real baseball fan, and I appreciate being here.
We'll hear more from Reggie later, including his thoughts about his moment on the podium, as well as hear the thoughts of the writers and broadcasters joining him in enshrinement. And later, the poignant story of Ferguson Jenkins, whose greatest moments have always been tinged with sorrow.
Chuck Thompson going into the Hall of Fame, and the question is not whether or not he belongs there. That goes without saying. The question is, why did it take so long? Chuck Thompson, revered in Baltimore and Washington as the longtime voice of the Orioles, one of the best there ever was. Chuck Thompson into the Hall of Fame. Now it feels just right.
It seems to me, however, that the people in baseball today aren't having as much fun as my generation always did, and that's a shame. Perhaps that's because we never took ourselves too seriously. It was the work, writing for us, playing for the players, that had to be taken seriously, not ourselves as some sort of big shots. If everyone concerned could lighten up a little bit these days and not feel so uptight and self-important so much of the time, all of us might be better off.
Joining Coppett as co-recipient of the J.G. Spink Award is fellow writer Bus Sate. He started writing for New Jersey's Trentonian in 1964, then moved on to the Trenton Times, covering the Phillies, Yankees, and Mets, an average of 180 games a season. Bus Sate died at the age of 68 in April of '89. Sate is just one of many Hall of Famers who are no longer with us. When we return, we remember the 6 immortals who we've lost since last year's ceremonies, including 1984 inductee Don Drysdale. Welcome back to our show, and one of the traditions of Hall of Fame weekend is the annual exhibition game, and this Monday's will be a special one, the Dodgers against the Indians, 2 franchises touched by tragedy in the past year. The Indians with the boating accident this spring, the Dodgers with the recent passings of Roy Campanella and Don Drysdale. But those are just 2 of a half a dozen Hall of Famers who have left us since last August. Jack Edwards remembers.
Since the 1992 induction, baseball has lost 6 Hall of Famers. In September of 1992, Cubs great Billy Herman passed away. He played 10 seasons for Chicago. On the eve of the '92 World Series, legendary play-by-play announcer Red Barber died. Red Barber and Mel Allen were the first broadcasters honored as Ford Frick recipients in 1978. Barber's style of broadcasting set standards for everyone who followed.
Here's the pitch. Swung on, belted. It's a long one. Deep to left center. Back for John Frito. Back. He makes a one-handed catch against the bullpen. Oh, doctor.
In January, Detroit Tiger great Charlie Gehringer died. A career .320 hitter, he had over 200 hits and 100 or more RBIs in 7 seasons. He was elected to the Hall of Fame in 1949. 1981 Hall of Fame inductee Johnny Mize was affectionately known as the Big Cat. The 6'2", 215-pounder was a powerful first baseman who smacked 359 career home runs. Although a hulking figure, his demeanor was that of a gentle giant.
Oh, years ago, writers were telling me that I'd make the Hall of Fame, so I kind of prepared a speech. But somewhere along in the 28 years, he got lost.
The Dodgers lost 2 of their all-time greats in the span of a week. Roy Campanella, a 1969 inductee, was the model for future catchers. A 3-time National League MVP, his career was cut short in 1958 by an auto accident. Campanella also was the second black player to be elected into the Hall after Jackie Robinson. Just a week later, Don Drysdale was found dead in his hotel room due to an apparent heart attack. A 1984 inductee, Drysdale won 209 games with the Dodgers. He was the 1962 National League Cy Young Award winner, and in 1968, he pitched 58 1/3 scoreless innings. A renowned broadcaster after his playing career, few people had his passion for the game.
As great as this game is, as much fun as we have in this game, the thrills, if it was not for you, the fans, walking through turnstiles, turning on radios, turning on televisions, coming here to Cooperstown to witness these induction ceremonies, to just watch possibly a game that you love, baseball would not survive.
My mother knew before I did that the sport of baseball was what I should play. Although she was blind and never saw me play, she always knew that this was the game that I wanted to do wholeheartedly. Thank you very much, Mother. I know you're here. Thank you.
That acceptance speech defines Ferguson Jenkins. In the moment of his greatest glory, he experienced the extremes of personal tragedy like no other Hall of Famer. Although he has exclusive company here, he is 25th on the all-time victory list. Perhaps no other Hall of Famer has had to weather the bittersweet in the manner of Ferguson Jenkins. 2 years after his enshrinement, our Robin Roberts visited his ranch in Oklahoma to see how Ferguson Jenkins is coping, while our attention is focused on other immortals.
Professionally, he was known for his wins, 284 of them. But since his retirement in 1984, Ferguson Jenkins has experienced mostly losses: a wife, a fiancé, and a 3-year-old daughter. Just days before Ferguson was elected to the Hall of Fame in January of 1991, his wife, Mary Ann, suffered a broken neck in a car accident. She died 4 days after his election.
She's still with me. I have tremendous thoughts of her all the time, the happy times that we had.
Soon after Jenkins' loss, he was visited by a friend, Cindy Takiadine. She offered to temporarily stay at his ranch and help with little Samantha and Raymond. She never left, growing closer to Jenkins and his children. Eventually, they were engaged. Life was turning around for Jenkins. Then 5 months later,
the police officer or the sheriff phoned me, and when I went in and talked about it, I was angry because I really didn't understand.
Takiadine and his 3-year-old daughter Samantha were found dead of carbon monoxide poisoning. An act ruled a murder-suicide by police, not quite 2 years after the death of Jenkins' wife.
2 people had been taken from you, and you don't know why, and why said Cindy was mad at me or angry at something or depressed. Don't add it by taking a youngster. So I don't have any answers yet. Some questions still, but the anger is not there anymore. There has been some instrumental people that has kept Ferguson Jenkins plugging along and still hanging in there.
Where do you draw your strength to be here sitting here?
I'm not too strong. I have problems. You know, it's just you hope that I think that the Almighty is not going to really put things on you that are going to really send you over the edge, because there's been a few nights, I've had some bad days. They're gone, but I can still see them. Well, they haven't really left me. So it's worked. It's worked to the point where your imagination can take over sometimes, too. And I look through the family albums.
Is it hard to see these pictures?
Oh, yeah, in a way. See some of them. Too bad didn't grow into the little lady she should have been.
Etsy with the swing set is still...
Yeah, I haven't taken it down. There's a few things that Samantha's here. I just haven't... Just friendly reminders.
Right.
I just kept some pictures up of her in the house. But it's sometimes it's a little agonizing when you come home and you see little things, you know, and it just reminds you what could have been.
Jenkins attends a regular support group. He also works as a roving instructor in the Reds organization. But the majority of his time the last 2 years has been spent at his ranch in Oklahoma with son Raymond. Mary Ann was Raymond's mother, and Jenkins adopted him shortly after her death.
I look in his face, and you know, it's an easier time when he's there with me. And I think that as he grows, I think we can grow together.
So Jenkins is a survivor. He lives on a ranch he built for his wife and their children. Now he has only Raymond and his memories and his unanswered questions.
Everyone has, you know, death in the families. Unfortunately, it's not, I think, inflicted either young or old, but it will show how strong an individual you are, and it's just been mounting up. I just hope that I can continue to deal with it.
Thank you, Robin. Ferguson Jenkins, a very special Hall of Fame. And as we continue, Dave Campbell rejoins me. We'll take a look ahead to see who might be joining Ferguson Jenkins and Reggie in the future here in Cooperstown, and more with Reggie. We'll get his thoughts after his moment on the podium as we continue Reggie Jackson Day at the Hall of Fame. All right, welcome back to the show, and Reggie Jackson joins me now. We heard his speech earlier in the broadcast, and it was an eloquent speech, rather pointed at times, Reggie, and one of the many things that stuck out for me is you talked about friendship. What did the game of baseball teach you about the nature of friendship?
Well, I don't think the game of baseball really is any different than life. You know, as I said, there are some people that seemingly are more important than others, but without the people that seem to be less important, then the most important ones don't really have a function. You know, they don't have anything to do. Everyone has their little part. And so baseball, I think, is you can mirror life with it. And the friends that I developed outside the game were very supportive to me during the game, you know, while I was playing. During my down times, the way that they rooted for you, the way you could feel them root for you gives you a certain kind of energy in order to go on during difficult times. I mean, if you look at my record or look at any player's record in the game of baseball, you're super success if you are successful 30% of the time. I struck out for 5 years, 2,500 strikeouts at 500 a year. I swung and missed for 5 years. I mean, so I had some tough times. And I think in order to be successful and in order to rise to certain heights than the ones that I did during the fall, then you have to have those innate energies that support you and give you the ability, or to allow your ability to come out. I believe that friends are able, with their support, you can feel them rooting for you. You can feel that support, and that gives you the energy to rise to heights so that your ability can be creative and be super. I don't think you can be super without super support.
You know, you talked about superstars, and now you're in there with the Hall of Fame with all the greats that we saw this weekend, and it's a huge month for Reggie Jackson. Number 44 will be retired by the Yankees on August 14th, and then later in the month, the Reggie Bar comes back as we remember what is now Hall of Famer Reggie Jackson. In our next segment, Dave Campbell rejoins me. We consider who might be joining Reggie in the Hall of Fame next August. And on our way to that, another great moment. Home run number 500. It came in the very same stadium where he hit his first one 17 years to the day.
There it goes. Home run number 500.
The 1993 Baseball Hall of Fame induction ceremonies have been brought to you by the American Express card. Don't leave home without it.
Welcome back to the show. And Dave, Reggie Jackson had the 10th highest vote percentage of all time, this despite a volatile relationship with the media at best. Next year's class is headed up by Steve Carlton, who for much of his career had no relationship with the press. What kind of vote reaction do you think he'll get? And do you think it might be like this year with just one guy going in from that class?
Yeah, that's a possibility. The interesting thing on the vote for Carlton, he's certainly a first ballot Hall of Famer, but he's the only man to win 4 Cy Young Awards. Tom Seaver last year set the highest percentage for a first ballot, 96.3%. Carlton, every bit the pitcher Seaver was. He's certainly worthy of those kind of numbers. I just wonder if the media might hold against him that he wasn't too cooperative. They shouldn't, but they might. Other guys to consider, pitchers, Don Sutton, certainly Hall of Fame credentials. I don't know if he'll go in on the first ballot, though. Ron Guidry and Bruce Sutter, position players like Greg Nettles, Don Baylor, Davey Concepcion, Ted Simmons. So certainly some guys worthy, but I think maybe from that class, Carlton might be the only guy to make it the first year.
Another guy who could go in, though, another former Yankee, Phil Niekro, who won his 300th game as a Yankee, just missed it. He could go in next year. There are some guys that come up year after year and just narrowly miss it who we'd like to see in the Hall of Fame. I understand there's been a voting change that could help them out in the future.
Yeah, it hasn't been announced yet, and they haven't crossed all the T's or dotted the I's yet. But what they're going to do, they're going to throw out that rule that after 1945 you had to get 60% at least one time. They're going to move that up to 1991. But the guys previous to that, they didn't think it was fair. If they got 100 votes at any time, they can be considered. So Richie Ashburn may be alive again. And the other thing, they've changed the Hall of Fame Veterans Committee, 3 new members, and I think this is going to help Phil Rizzuto, Yogi Berra, Bill White, and Pee Wee Reese. So I think Rizzuto's chances just increased to getting in also.
One of the guys who comes so close, it seems, every year, and people would like to see in, is Orlando Cepeda. What do you think distinguishes Cha-Cha?
Well, he was dominant during his era, and the interesting thing about Cepeda is it was an at-bat he never had that may have defined his importance to the game. 1962 World Series. 7th game, Yankees leading 1-0. The tying run at third, the winning run at second. First base is open. Ralph Houck, the Yankee manager, elects to have a right-handed pitcher, Ralph Terry, pitch to Willie McCovey instead of walking him to get to Cepeda. He didn't want to face Cepeda. He thought Cepeda was the best clutch hitter in the league at that time, and so an at-bat that didn't happen, I think, puts Cepeda in the Hall of Fame.
Leave it to Dave Campbell, the only man that could give you an at-bat that never occurred as the defining moment of a career. There's nothing left to say, except that we want to thank all the people at the Hall of Fame for making this show possible. Their cooperation was fantastic, and if you've never been out here, it's beautiful country. The memories are endless. Make it a point to visit, and we'll see you next year.